really probably knowing 100% what they were getting themselves into, but they all had a passion for French, and they all had a passion for something else that they wanted to discover. And so through the months, starting after their acceptance and through our trip to France, and probably until about 11 o'clock last night, they've been working on a research project into a subject that they are very interested in. And so today is the culmination of all of these months of study, work, preparation, hopefully enjoyment. And we are thrilled to have these presentations to watch today. So I just wanted to welcome you, and I want to recognize a few people. First of all, of course, the fellows and their families. Thank you so much, because without you, the program doesn't exist. I would also like to recognize our president of the Alliance Française, Daniel Gibault, and his wife, Cheryl Gibault, who are, of course, important people in everything that we do. I would also like to recognize Dr. Kathleen Skinner, who is a state of Oklahoma and is a tremendous partner in the Fellows Program, because the Fellows Program is pursuant to an agreement between the State Department of Education and the region of France called Hauts-de-France, formerly Picardie. So it all ties together, and she's a fantastic partner in everything that we do. Thank you, Kathleen, for all your work. And Amanda Babcock is the teacher at Westminster here, and she is making this auditorium available to us and helping out with all the technology. We appreciate you very much. And we have a few board members here. We have Ginny and Grant and Kirk and Ann. Thank you, board members, for coming. Appreciate that very much. And last but certainly not least, I want to welcome and appreciate Madame Caroline Shepard, who is the French teacher at Edmond North, and she also was not only the hosting sponsor for the French fellows who came here at Edmond North, but then a couple of weeks later, she took your kids to France and did an outstanding job of being their sponsor and their go-to person while in Amiens, and she did all that with the flu. So poor Caroline was sick while she was there, but she didn't let it slow her down. It was amazing, and thank you so very much. Would you come and accept this, please? So enough of that. Let's listen to our fellows and their presentations. You have, one more thing, most importantly. In the program, there is a description of the Eleanor Kirkpatrick Frano-American Fellows Program, which you've all probably read before, but just take a look again to see how extraordinary this program is. In addition, know that we rely on donations. We have an endowment, but that doesn't cover all of our costs. We also rely on donations from friends of the Alliance Française, and so we would welcome any donations from anyone here. All you have to do is use this to donate. So it's very simple. We made it very simple for you. And then of course,
online program, you can click on it, or you can use your camera to scan the QR code.
Did everyone hear that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then on the back,
We didn't hear.
oh, you can either just click on this with your camera, or you can go online and donate on our website.
We have an online program as well that you can click on the button on the online program and it will take you to the website.
Okay, so anyway, we gratefully appreciate any donations if you are so inclined. On the back are some upcoming OKC events that we would love to see the fellows at. Once a fellow, always a fellow. So we really want you to continue to be involved. If you want to be a member of Jeunesse, we would very much welcome you to do that. If you're still in high school, we're really trying to get all the high schools involved and active. If you're going to college, that's okay too. You're going to come home sometimes, and maybe if you're local, you can still be involved in some events. For all the Kayla. Sorry. So Kayla up here was a fellow last year, And she responded to our cry for help at the very last minute because the person who was going to run the live streaming got COVID and could not come. So she's one of my students at Edmond Memorial. She graduated last night, and so she's now a high school graduate. And she's also the leader of the Jeunesse, has been the leader of the Jeunesse all year and has done a terrific job with that. And like I said, we would love to get fellows involved with that. And if you're a teacher at a high school in Oklahoma, please encourage your students to do that. Because it's a tremendous organization and it's on sort of the ground floor now. We're just really trying to make it grow. So thank you, Kayla, for taking your first Saturday of freedom and coming and helping us out. Appreciate it very much. Okay, so Miss Samantha Burkhead is going to start with her presentation. We're going in alphabetical order, and I will let her take it away.
Hello, I am Samantha Burkhead, and my presentation is on the preservation of old buildings in France versus the United States. First, I'd like to start with the history of each country. In France, I start in the 800s with Charlemagne's rule of Francia, just to show you how France's architectural timeline is much greater than the US's. I also include any wars that France could have, in France that could have impacted the architecture. I also did the United States architectural history as well. I started in the 1600s when the colonists started settling, and I also included any wars that could have impacted any architecture, which really was only the American Revolution and the Civil War. I'd also, before going into each country's specific programs, I'd like to talk about UNESCO. UNESCO is a global organization that preserves sites and buildings worldwide. Its full name is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. It is run through the UN, and funnily enough, the headquarters are in Paris. It also establishes World Heritage Sites, and some of the examples of their impacts in each country are, in France, they protect the Cathedral Notre Dame d'Amiens, the Palace of Versailles, and then in the US, they do Independence Hall and Monticello, which is Thomas Jefferson's home. Next, I'd like to talk about French preservation efforts. When I was in France, I was able to interview people who worked at the DRAC, which is the Regional Directorate of Cultural Affairs. They are run under the Minister of Culture, which is a branch of the French government. I was mainly speaking to people from the Hauts-de-France region. They make and regulate policies with the PVAP, so it's basically a guidebook that has all the regulations when you're trying to restore an old building and things like that. And also the DRAC is not just restoring old buildings, they also do archaeology as well. The classification of building system is, there's two types: inscription, which is regional, and if you own the building, if they ask you to do any restoration to the building or they have any regulations, you have to comply. Whereas with classement, it's national, and if you own the building, you can refuse. And lastly, they basically will restore anything with cultural meaning. I asked them if it was harder to restore some things more than others. And they said castles are really hard to restore because it requires a lot of money and funding, and a lot of people aren't willing to do that. Whereas churches, lots of people are able to fund that. And I asked them also about negative reactions. When I asked that, they didn't have any politically negative reactions. The only thing that they said that might be a negative reaction is people who want to restore buildings to a specific way, but they can't do that due to regulations. The DRAC is actually an old church that they restored, which was really cool. And I got to go there. I also got to see the archaeology department, and so they were finding artifacts from all over the Hauts-de-France region, and I got to see that. And lastly, I saw a artifact from a demolished church, which is on the right. Next, I'll talk about cases of preservation in France. First, I'd like to talk about the Maisons Amiénoises. These are 19th century homes all over the Hauts-de-France region, specifically in Amiens, that's the name. They were built around the Industrial Revolution when people from rural areas were moving to urban centers. They created these well-known brick houses that we see here, but most of these houses are a bit newer though, because in World War I, Amiens faced artillery, so a lot of them were destroyed and had to be reconstructed. But nowadays, many of these homes are protected to keep their distinct features. There are also many rules and regulations when people want to renovate these houses. Gilles de Robien was the mayor of Amiens in the 90s and advocated for the preservation of these houses. This is what I was talking about earlier with the PVAP, how like they have all the specific regulations. And so like you have to have your windows a certain color or specific tiles on your house and just all of the rules. Next I'll talk about the Cathédrale de Notre-Dame d'Amiens. It is also under UNESCO. It is the largest cathedral of France, and actually a lot of people in Amiens are very proud of it because it's almost double the size of the one in Paris. And then it was built in the 13th century, and then preservation started in the 19th century with Eugène Viollet-le-Duc. He was a French architect who was very famous for preserving French medieval architecture. And then it was one of the only things that was not bombed during World War I, but there were parts that were like destroyed. This is the inside. Right now they are restoring the organ and the rose. And also what's really special about this cathedral is all the clear glass you see there is not the original. It is the ones that they restored because they wanted to make sure people who went there were able to see what was the original one and what was not. But all the stained glass you see is the original ones from the 13th century. And then the other glass that is in the glass case is at the Musée de Picardie, so people can view it while it's protected. The like octagon-shaped thing in the center is what is right now at the cathedral, kind of in the middle. But the real one is at the Musée de Picardie as well, and the like embellishments that are white and gold were probably demolished or stolen over the years. And then they also have the statues, which are also at the Musée de Picardie for preservation, which used to be part of the church. Next, I'll talk about the Cathedral Notre-Dame for Paris. It is also protected under UNESCO. Viollet-le-Duc and Jean-Baptiste Lassus restored it during the mid-1800s, and as many of you know, on April 15th, 2019, there was a fire. It was severely damaged, but I will be talking you through the process of how they restored it. First, they had to remove and conserve the artwork. They tried to secure the most important relics and other objects first. Later on, they slowly removed fragile sculptures. The stained glass stayed intact, luckily, and they were able to remove it to restore it. The clearing was next, and due to the advancement of technology, they were able to use robots to clear the inaccessible areas. Archaeologists were also able to create 3D images to determine the exact location of the debris before the collapse. The frames of the building were scorched, but archaeologists were able to learn a lot about the structure at the time it was built. Next, I'll talk about the United States preservation efforts. I'd first like to talk about the National Park Service. It restores and protects many of the historical buildings and monuments of the U.S. The National Historical Landmarks. The U.S. has about 2,600 of them under their protection. They also create building codes like the BLAC. They create rules and policies regarding historical buildings, and they have many steps before you can be a part of their protection. And some things that are under their protection are like many of the presidential homes, including like President Adams and John Quincy Adams. I'd also like to talk a little more closer to home with the Oklahoma Historical Society. It is promoted by the Oklahoma government to preserve Oklahoma culture, and it is also associated with the Smithsonian. Some of the buildings that they protect are the Overholser Mansion as seen here, the Ponyville Ranch, and the Will Rogers Birthplace Ranch. And then next, I'll talk about the cases of U.S. preservation. The first one I'd like to talk about is the Hamilton Grange. It was Alexander Hamilton's home. It is protected under the National Park Service. It was one of the National Park Service largest restoration projects, and they moved the home in the summer of 2008. And what I mean when they moved the home is this. The entire process took 38 days from the time the house was separated from its foundation to when it arrived at its new site. The move was the first step in a full-scale restoration. Wolf House building movers of Pennsylvania were selected to move this house because they would not need to split the house in half to get it past its neighboring structures. The project also presented a unique set of challenges because it was in between a church and apartment complex. They wanted to move the building because they figured it was kind of destroying its integrity because it was kind of in the middle of this urban area and it was really hard to restore the building. So they had to move it 38 feet vertically in order to roll it out and then down the street. They used a system of linked hydraulic jacks to maintain a level and uniform lift to reduce stress on the house. And then later they took 24 hours to lower it down, and then they brought it to its new home in St. Nicholas Park. Next, I'd like to talk about Francis Tavern. It is privately owned, but it is protected by the National Park Service. It is where Washington gave his farewell speech, and it was originally set for demolition. The Daughters of the American Revolution later turned to the America Scenic Historic Preservation Society, worked to preserve it, and convinced New York State government leaders not to demolish it. They originally didn't want to because historic preservation was still a new idea in the U.S. I can compare it real quick because in France in the 1800s, they're already starting to preserve buildings that were centuries old. It was bought by the Sons of the Revolutions in the state of New York, Inc., and an extensive reconstruction was completed in 1907 under the supervision of a preservation architect, William Rousseau. The National Park Service added the surrounding city block to the National Register of Historic Places, and in the 2000s, it added the building itself. Next, I'll talk about the viewpoints of each country's citizens on the preservation of architecture. First, I asked them, how many historic sites have you visited in the US? I think this really impacts the data you will later see because in France, the majority of people have seen 20 plus historical sites, while the majority of the people in the US have seen 4 to 8. I also asked the age of the buildings that they have seen, and from France, it was mainly around the 1400s to present day, while in the US, it was from the 1700s to present day. I also asked, do you think it's important to preserve old buildings? The data here shows that people pretty much thought the same things, though in America there was a select few who did think it was important. I also asked, do you think it's better to build new buildings or preserve old buildings? As you can see in France, no one said not at all to restoring old buildings, while in France, in America, it was a more diverse answer where most people wanted a median of it. And lastly, I asked, do you think historical buildings impact your everyday life? This could be cultural, environmental, personal, etc., and it could also be positive or negative. This is where the data was very different. In France, most people, 61%, said yes, it does impact their lives, while in America, 61% said no. I think this can be seen because of the data from before of how many people in France have seen lots of culture, and they're also surrounded by culture because of their longer history. And then I also got quotes from people. I'll read the first one and you can read the rest. It shows how through history, architecture has changed and progressed. We can also see all of the architectural details, so maybe we can use them, some of those techniques in present day. I think this person was more on the side of preserving architecture. I also got quotes from France. I know not everyone here can read French, so I will be translating them. The first one says, it is a testimony of history that we can come across every day, which is accessible to all. The second one states, it's renovating old buildings is important because history is important, and you can keep the memories of traditional buildings and building new ones, allow new cultural and new art. And lastly, the importance of historical beauty of buildings can trace our past, symbolize history, and build our nation's culture. My conclusion is I think ideally both countries would like to preserve their history, but there are certain factors that make it more difficult, especially in the US. I think politically it is also different in the US, but also I think a cultural plays a large part into that because in France they have a longer history, and also I think it's part of their kind of national identity that they preserve lots of culture and have so many old buildings. I'd like to thank everyone who made this trip possible, and thank you for listening. Wait, what? Oh, wait, what does that mean? Oh, gosh. There it is. I was like, what? Okay. Where's the slideshow? Wait, what?
You see where it says plus and minus at the bottom, just to the left of that, there is a little TV screen. If you click on that, that's presentation.
No.
No. To the left.
Sorry, guys.
I feel like I should be more like tech savvy since but it's okay. It's loading. I broke it. Okay. What the heck? Okay, there. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Hewen. As you all probably know, in March, myself and 6 other high school students traveled to and then lived in France for 2 weeks. While I was in France, I conducted my own research project titled The Differences Between the French and American School Week. Now, I obviously was not able to analyze every single high school in either France or the United States, but I was able to compare 6 different high schools in the United States to one high school which I attended when I was in France. Today, I will share 7 major differences I found between American and French high schools. Okay. As I was walking into Lycée de Landry Montagne on my first day of French high school, I noticed that the campus was split into 2. One side was used for Lycée Professionnel, while the other was used for Lycée Général. I soon learned that in France, all high schoolers have the option to attend a Lycée Général or a Lycée Professionnel. The Lycée Général is a traditional route towards further studies and higher education. For the 3 years a student attends the Lycée Général, they study a common core of subjects. Then when they are in their premiere or junior year, they will choose what they want to major in college and then study this selected subject for most of their terminal/senior year. The students who choose to attend Lycée Professionnel will become specially trained in a particular profession. These professions are usually found in fields such as mechanics, industrial designs, sales, and computer science. I found it very interesting and smart that the majority of French high schools give their students a chance to choose what type of high school they would like to attend. In the United States, there are vocational and ordinary high schools. There is not a uniform procedure for attending a VOTEC or ordinary school throughout all the states. In the United States, there are 3 standard models for how they offer vocational training. These 3 models are self-contained schools that are separated from the traditional high school, schools that operate in a separate wing,
programs where kids attend traditional high school in the morning and then take a bus to a technology and career center in their area. Also, I forgot to say, the first time here, I wasn't able to take photos inside my school because they weren't allowed, so I just took some pictures of ambulance throughout the slides. So yeah, like that's there's chickens. Anyways. The second major difference I discovered while in France is an exam called Le Baccalaureate, or Le Bac. Le Bac is an extensive national exam taken at the end of lycée, which is high school in French. At the end of 12th grade, students take 3 written exams, philosophy and 2 specialty subjects they have chosen and studied during 11th and 12th grade, and 1 oral exam about a personal project linked to a specialty subject. These exams contribute for 60% of the final grade. Every French student must take this test in order to go to college. If students do not pass the BAC, they must retake a year of high school and then retake the BAC. The schools post the scores of the BAC of each student publicly. The day the scores are revealed, most families go with their kid to go see the scores. It is a very big deal. Now, in the United States, we usually do not share our scores on any type of test with others, so when I found out that in France everyone sees one another's scores, I was very surprised. It's like an extra motive for them to study, I guess. Now, in the United States, we usually do not share in the United States, we do not have a test exactly like the BAC. The closest type of exam I could find to the BAC was either the SAT or ACT. These tests are not even close to being as important in the United States as the BAC is in France. An American student is able to receive a diploma with or without these tests, while a French student must pass the BAC to receive a diploma. My third major difference is a program called Apprentissage. I got to meet with Monsieur Moret, the director of Apprentissage at Lycée de Lombard-Montagne. He told me all about the Apprentissage program. The Apprentissage program is for anyone between the ages of 16 and 29 years old, and mainly people who are interested in the applied science field. Examples are engineering or computer science. This program allows students to be a part-time student and a part-time worker. It allows students to become specialized in the profession of the job they hold during apprenticeship, which often results in these students to instantly get hired for full-time work after they graduate. Companies really like this program because it allows them to hire people who are already trained and specialized for a certain job. I took a picture of the schedule of the students at my school who were part of this program. You can't really see it, but the green is the time they were at school, the red is weekend or days off, and then the white is for at work. So they would attend 13 days of school in a row and then 15 days of work. I was unable to discover a popular or well-known program like this in the United States, so that was a really major difference I found. The fourth major difference I found were schools called micro-lycées. At the high school I attended, there was a micro-lycée on the campus. It was so close I could walk to it. During one of my school days, I walked over to the micro-lycée to meet with Monsieur de Liniers, the coordinator of the micro-lycée at my school. He informed me all about the program, who it benefits, and why it is important. Micro-lycées are a French structure for students from the ages of 16 to 25 years old who previously dropped out of high school to return to school and receive their diploma. There is a small ratio of students to teachers in order for the teachers to focus on each individual student's needs. After attending the micro-lycée for 1 to 2 years, a student will take the BAC, and if they pass, they will then receive their diploma. In the United States, people who did not receive their diploma can study to pass the GED. GED stands for a General Educational Development Program. It is an alternative to a traditional high school diploma. Individuals must study and prepare for the GED test alone or on their own time. There is no school to get a GED, but one can buy books and attend study groups. The next major difference I will be talking about is a high schooler's daily schedule. While attending a French school, I followed the schedule of my host girl. On the slide is a picture of her schedule. Every school day began at 8:30 a.m. From 8:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. there were 2 classes that were both 2 hours long. From 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. was lunch. Their lunches were wonderful, so many options, it was really great. Once lunch finished, I attended either 4 1-hour classes or 2 2-hour classes, depending on the day. The day finally finishes at 5:30 p.m. So my school day in the United States also starts at 8:30, but it ends at 3:30, which is a big difference. But my day consists of 4 classes before lunch, which starts at 1:15 p.m. American lunches are a lot different than French school lunches. The amount of time students at my school spend eating on average is 15 to 20 minutes. In France, the students would go get their lunch, sit down, talk, eat slowly, and then finish lunch. At my school, it almost feels like a race of who can finish eating the fastest. But I think this difference speaks more towards the difference between the the American and French society. Now back to my American schedule. From 1:40 p.m. to 3:30, I have 2 more 1-hour classes. And then my school day is complete. For the most part, the French high school classes I took were the same as the American classes I take now. At my French high school, I took math, science, French, English, Spanish, art history, art, geography, and a sports education class. In my American school, I take math, science, French, English, history, and yearbook. I have the option to take art classes, but I personally do not choose to take them. So all in all, French classes and American classes are very similar. Next, I will be talking about the differences between French students and American students' after-school routine. First, I will talk about the French students' routine. They return home at about 5:45 p.m. At this time, they would be very tired from their long school day, so they would watch TV, spend time on their phone, and wind down. Then at about 7 p.m., them and their family would sit down for dinner. In France, dinner is not only a very important meal, but a very important time for the family to spend time together to talk and reconnect after a long day of school and work. Their dinners would take anywhere from 45 minutes to 1 hour. I asked 7 different French students how much time on average per night they spend doing homework. The average of these 7 answers was 20 minutes to 45 minutes, which to me was surprising. You'll see why in 1 second. On the left is the French student information, and on the right is American students. So, an American student's after-school routine starts with the student either returning home or going to their sport at 4 p.m. Most of the students I interviewed played a sport that had a 2-hour practice each night. Once their practice was over, so let's say 6 p.m., the student goes home. They either shower, have some downtime, or immediately eat dinner. I asked American students what an average weekday dinner looked like for them. The response of almost every single student I asked this question was, "It is quick and I normally do not eat with my parents. If we do eat together, it is for about 10 to 20 minutes." So as you can see, the French family dinner routine is extremely different from the average American family's routines. After dinner, students then spend time on homework. I sent a survey out to 500 American high schoolers. Was how long on average do you spend on homework each night? Half of the students said 1 to 2 hours, 20% said 3 hours or more, and 20% said 30 minutes. The difference in the amount of time French students spend on homework and sports versus the amount of time American students spend each night on homework and sports is significant. I wanted to investigate the differences between French and American sports more, so my final major difference I discovered was the time and importance of sports for French high schoolers versus American high schoolers. I interviewed 7 French students. Out of these 7 students, only 2 played a sport. They each had, on average, 3 45-minute practices a week and 1 2-hour competition per weekend. This is a total of 3 to 3.5 hours per week spent on their sport. I sent the same questionnaire out to 500 American students and received 431 responses. From these 431 responses, 67.3% of the students played a sport, which is about 290 students. I then asked these 290 students how many times per week they meet for their sport and on average how long each practice takes. Almost 50% of these students said they met 5 times a week and about 20% said they met 6 times a week. On average, each student said their practice lasted for 2 hours. This is a total of 10 to 13 hours per week spent on their sport. This is a significant difference compared to the time French students spend on their sports, which is like a whole 10 hours difference per week, which is 3,650 hours per year. So that's a lot. That's it, but my last thing I would like to say is I had a wonderful time in France. I learned so much and was able to gain so much perspective by getting to live within a different culture for 2 weeks. I am beyond grateful for this experience. I want to thank Alliance Française for accepting me into their program, Eleanor, Kirkpatrick Foundation for sponsoring all 7 of our trainings.
Hi, my name is Ella James. I'm a junior at Classen School of Advanced Studies at Northeast. For my project, I studied the financing of films in France versus the United States, and to share the information I learned while on my trip to Amiens, I made a short documentary-style film to share. The documentary consists of different places I went around Amiens in France that had to do with film or creativity in different ways. Because Amiens didn't have a large film scene, I took the research in a way that shined light on the potential Amiens could have and the beauty that could be depicted on film. The film follows along a journey to Tiquet, a small beach town an hour and a half away from Amiens. Amiens Noir, a small village I stayed in that consisted of only a rundown church and a field of horses, a museum of art and history, a trip to Paris, and the only movie theater in Amiens. I had the pleasure of interviewing French producers, casting directors, and distributing agents to gather my knowledge and sources, and so to them, the Alliance Française de Oklahoma City and the Eleanor Kirkpatrick Frano-American Fellowship Program, I am eternally grateful. Before I get to the film, I want to address some things that occurred outside of my project in Amiens on this trip of truly a lifetime. Almost a year ago, I was diagnosed with anorexia nervosa, an eating disorder that aims for control and self-harm. I was underweight and strictly eating only every other day. Thanks to my amazing mom, I began treatment in August of last year and have been in recovery ever since. When I first arrived in Amiens, something I had been growing subconsciously more and more anxious about because I didn't know what my meals would look like. I had no idea the journey I would be on. At my first host family's house, I had the privilege of staying with 2 families. I got to meet Axel. She was 12 years old, the younger sister of Adeline, who was my host student. Through patchy French, I learned that she had been suffering from anorexia since February. I arrived on Sunday, played basketball with her on Tuesday, and dropped her off at the Children's Hospital on Wednesday. I got to visit her at the Children's Hospital to find her there, still refusing to eat with a tube feeding her through her nose. It woke me up to how serious of a situation I myself was in and pushed me to reach out to Axel and offer her advice and guidance. It pushed me deeper into committing to my own recovery. All this to say that sometimes the world works in mysterious ways to try to keep you in it. And for this experience and knowledge alone, I am forever in debt to the Alliance Française de Oklahoma City and the Eleanor Kirkpatrick Franco-American Fellowship Program. And now, my short film.
As I traveled about Amiens, I kept wondering how there wasn't any film industry here. I asked my host families and their friends, no, nothing like that in Amiens. It blew my mind. The space, beautiful scenery, and easy access to completely different environments felt like an obvious choice for any studio. So I began my research as to why Amiens had little to no film industry present. I interviewed people asking them about French policies overall to get a better understanding of it. Here's what I found. Number one, directors, writers, basically artists in general, have a lot more state support, particularly in their rights. In the US, copyright in the film industry is where most of the money is made, franchising, distribution rights, etc. In France, however, the ability to sell your rights to your script or your film, it just doesn't exist at all. The legal structure of cinema is also based around this idea of protecting one's rights in art, whereas in the US, cinema is powered by business and money. Number two, indie productions are much better funded and prominent in France compared to the US. Producers and distributors are always looking for more indie films to back. Number three, big studios like Paramount, Warner Brothers, and Universal, they just don't exist. But the closest thing to the studio system in France are production companies that handle distribution, such as PAF and Studio Canal. Number four, the US has the festival distribution chain nailed down way more than France. French filmmakers will only sometimes submit to high-profile festivals like Cannes and Sundance, only if it works on their timeline. This, however, is where many US films pick up their big distribution and audience. Number five, French movie theaters are way more advanced than in the US. The movie theater I went to was high-tech and resembled a metro system, but they headlined primarily American blockbuster films, opposed to French films. TV shows are similar in that way, where many of the friends I was meeting at school would talk to me about how they love Stranger Things and would just binge American Netflix shows. Number six, France does not have a significant, to what the people I've interviewed know, tax incentive for foreign films to come and shoot in. This is what brings many films to Prague, for example, or even Oklahoma, where we have one of the biggest tax incentives for films in the nation. Films come in and a certain percent of what they spend to bolster the economy is given back to them. So what do these 6 things mean for the French film industry? Well, the focus on indie films and lack of incentive for big budget foreign films makes the French film industry less lucrative and have less of a say in the economy. While French lawmakers focus on giving rights to the artist, an important thing that does not happen in America and causes things such as the writer's strike, which is happening now, they don't focus enough on the potential the industry could have, instead of making money off of American films playing in French cinemas. If France focused on improving these things, perhaps Amiens would have a more prominent film industry. Perhaps France would become a leading factor in film once again.
My name is Guillermo Boal, and my project is about homelessness. So, in OKC right now, there's a homeless population of 1,339. However, Oklahoma City is actively engaged in trying to reduce this number in poverty. And as you can see here, this is a list of every, if not most, of the programs and services provided that are aimed at reducing homelessness. However, the ones I chose to talk about are City Care Night Shelter and Oklahoma City Continuum of Care Community. So, the City Care Night Shelter is an emergency shelter in Oklahoma City. I volunteered there, and it was honestly quite nice. They try to make it welcoming and wholesome, and a safe environment. When homeless people are entering, they're required to hand away any contraband or harmful items, and this just creates a safe environment. And the time I was there, I was lucky enough to volunteer during one of their birthday parties that they have once every month. It's just a big party, and it has pizza, and everyone's welcome to grab a slice. And Oklahoma City comes to character. I know this isn't a homeless shelter, but I felt the need to bring it up. I think this committee reflects the government trying to take initiative and trying to reduce poverty and help the homeless community. So in Amiens, there is a much smaller population of homeless, around 100, according to one of the interviews I conducted. And honestly, I really noticed this difference when I was walking around Amiens. I didn't notice as many tents or camps and just people on the streets. And during one of my interviews, it was with Zungir, and he told me that France has a strong sense of solidarity. And I think the number of programs and services in Amiens is really representative of this, because I was honestly quite shocked to see like all the resources Amiens provided for homeless, considering the population was like significantly lower than it is in Oklahoma. So one of them is La Pastel, who's directly is Zungir. And La Pastel is similar to the city care night shelter here in OKC. It's a night shelter, and it has 55 beds, which is a lot less than what the city care has. And this number up there, 115, is what one would call in France when you need help. So if you're an immigrant, or if you're unemployed, or if something tragic happened, because you were at the wrong place and at the wrong time, and you just like feel like you lost your way in life, you can call this number and they'll get you help. And Pascal is also like specialized in helping those who are detained or and recently escaped, not escaped, released from prison. So, yes. The Restaurant du Board is also interesting. It's a French charity that gives meals to the homeless or really low-income families. It's organized a restaurant, and volunteers are responsible for making homemade meals and prepping the place. And they'll usually make bread, cheese, soup, and vegetables, but during my time in France, I spent a day. Okay, anyways, I found this group of people really interesting. So basically, they are volunteers in France that are part of an organization called Les Moral Citoyens. And basically, they hand out meals and clothing to the homeless on the streets. Basically, this activity is something similar to what my mom's friend Brian and I did in Oklahoma City here, like near outskirts of downtown Oklahoma City, where we gave meals to the homeless. And I thought it was really cool that people were also doing this in France, and they had like a name and reputation. So evidently, homelessness is a multi-dimensional problem that needs to be addressed in various ways. Rather than just substance abuse, financial issues, and unemployment, shelters are aware that family issues like emotional or parental neglect can also contribute to becoming homelessness. And even just unfortunate circumstances like being at the wrong place and at the wrong time. So shelters are aware of this, and they try to help the homeless in any way they can. For instance, shelters will typically send people who want to work to co-employ, and other programs for finding employment, helping with their health, and even with legal issues. There will be lawyers who volunteer to help fight for the homeless in France. And so, however, doing all of this would be like a super daunting task and near impossible to do with an individual institution. Which is why collaboration in Amiens and Oklahoma City is viewed as a crucial role in achieving the goals, their aims. So, Les Gens en France is a network of programs and shelters in Amiens La Passerelle was actually part of it with Numero Association and L'Opposition. And basically what they do is they identify young adults who may be at risk of being homeless and they send them to programs that can help or services that can help them the most. So, like I said, the home employed, it's in contrast to Oklahoma City. In Amiens, they focus on finding employment for homeless, whereas in Oklahoma City, it seems like they try to create affordable housing. So I think home employed, the institution is a good reflection of this. Yes. Point in time count is also a collaborative effort in Oklahoma City of the city of Oklahoma City, Coalition to End Poverty and Homeless Alliance. It's basically a metric used to determine how many homeless people are living in Oklahoma City at a certain time. And in 2022, it determined that there were 1,339 homeless people. And this is crucial because it determines the amount of federal money shelters will receive, while also giving us a sense of whether or not our plans are actually effective. And the church. In my experience, it seems as though churches have more of an impact here in Oklahoma City than in Amiens. As I showed you in the very beginning with the list, there are copious amounts of churches or church-affiliated programs and services that help the homeless. And I've also and from volunteering at the City Care Night Shelter, I noticed that from asking why other volunteers decided to be there, they said they're doing it through the church. Can mess up. And she also told me that talking with them to make them feel like they're still people rather than animals that are ignored on the street. In fact, here in Oklahoma, shelters do a similar thing. As I told you, City Care Night Shelter hosts birthday parties, and that because sometimes the homeless have been homeless for so long that they forget their own birthdays. These parties make them feel human again. And now in the end, during Christmas, they'll make little tote bags full of toys and presents, and foods, and handmade. So I asked Eleanor and La Passerelle what laws or policies could be implemented to better help the homeless, and they both replied with raising awareness, because there's already enough laws or policies in place. And they told me that raising awareness is the best way to support the homeless, and to really emphasize the fact that people should try to imagine themselves in the shoes of the homeless, because anyone is susceptible to being at the wrong place at the wrong time. And in Oklahoma City, there was a survey done in 2018 with over 700 people that took it, to which 77% believe that raising awareness was the best way, was a good way. And another 68% believe that statewide resource maps and contact information was also important. Okay. So, strengths and limitations of my research. I honestly did this for fun. I don't plan on reading all of it, but I think one of my strengths was the ability to volunteer in Oklahoma and in Amiens, because again, you first-hand perspective. Yeah. So my concluding thoughts. All of my research is a cultural comparison on shelters and services in Amiens and Oklahoma City. I pursued this project with the intention of trying to see how we could better improve our means of helping the homeless, and trying to portray the homeless community in a better spotlight that, opposes standard society views on the homeless community. So I accomplished that. Thank you. That's all.
my name is Liliana Wade, and my project is comparing anxiety in America and France. And before I begin, I would just like to extend my thanks to the Alliance Française and the Eleanor Kirkpatrick Foundation for making this project possible in the first place. It was truly an amazing experience that I will not forget. All right, so to begin with, my initial question on both surveys that I surveyed 100 students with in each country asked. These results were expected by myself as they are some of the same stressors I have dealt with in the past, but how do the stressors of American students compare to those of French students? Evidence suggests that even though the two groups of people may, the two groups of people examine and access to education in the first place. And although all evidence thus far suggests that France is the country with a higher anxiety level, further study proposes that the excess stress that has emerged in France in recent years may be due to different reasons than our anxiety here in the US. So the survey displays that in the US, 63.8% of students visibly saw an increase in their anxiety due to COVID-19. While in France, only 53% of students saw an increase in their anxiety due to the pandemic. And while discussing these results with high school students in France, it was suggested that the new increased anxiety could possibly be due to the recent changes made to the baccalaureate or the bac. Arguably, the most important and definitive test these students will have to take their entire academic career. I also, at Westmore, my school that I attend, I had the privilege of interviewing Dana Wasson, who is the mental health counselor on campus at all times. And so I started with just a general question of just what is anxiety? And she replied that anxiety is a normal chemical response to stress. We tend to think of anxiety as an abnormal response to something. Most of us try to brush it off or push forward, but in reality, anxiety is a perfectly normal response that all humans experience sometime in their life. And she also made me aware of a new study, and that was that the average rate of what people say could be diagnosed for anxiety used to be around 1 in 6 or 1 in 5, but post-COVID, some of those results are coming out that it could be closer to 1 in 4 or 1 in 3. And then as far as triggers for teens go, she thinks that the school environment is of course a very big trigger. And she thinks it's crucial to be a part of the school environment though, just as development for teens in general. But she actually thought the home was probably the primary stressor for most of the students. And another question that just piqued my interest, although it doesn't directly relate to the project of just anxiety in general for teens, was how gender roles play a part in the different levels of anxiety they experience. So she said that she would say that research is showing that more teen girls are experiencing anxiety than boys. And she thinks that absolutely girls are prone to experience some of those things. And there's some things in there too, expectations of gender roles that definitely play a role. But there's also a question around whether identifying their anxiety that boys are for different reasons. Do they have the same elements to manage it? And some of those things as well. And as I said, although my research is not centered around gender, I think that this is a very interesting take on the different ways teens experience anxiety, and that is definitely a direct relation to this project. And as far as who has more anxiety, the United States or France, she wasn't aware of any direct studies concerning anxiety, but there was a study that she made me aware of that I thought was extremely interesting. And she said that France actually has higher physical touch rates among teens. So in general, countries are very different, but countries with higher instances of physical touch have less anxiety. So in the US, teens are significantly more touch deprived than other countries. And the power of touch is a miraculous thing. And now having this nugget of research under my belt, I made sure to keep my eyes out abroad to see if such a thing was true. And even as a stranger attending a new school and staying in a new home, I found that the French were definitely more affectionate to strangers than in America. For example, the double bisou received upon the cheek as a customary greeting. And now for the French interviews, I'm going to do a little bit of a summarized version because I so graciously given to me by interviewing three amazing women who specialize in the mental state of disorder, agitation, and things like combinable insecurity. So while definitions from essence, after three, I'm sorry, I'm bad at pronouncing those words. But the main chemical involved in our brains, here's one study by the interviewees, that should definitely be addressed more often. So among the various resources I collected throughout my interview, I would like to pull a study from one of them to share with you. So in Europe, between 2014 and 2018, young people's sense of mental well-being declined sharply in many countries. Thus, 30% of 15-year-old adolescents declare themselves nervous more than once a week, 30% irritable, and a quarter have sleep disorders. And only 37% this for my clinic teens in France, as it is for anxiety. So while interviewing the best people, so Matthew Short also noted that she has seen an increase in anxiety after the pandemic, but is previously large. I would also like to pull upon another study I was graciously given by Madame Lafreniere concerning college or middle school students. So middle school is a very stressful time for the majority of teens, as I'm sure we all know. So I expected higher levels of anxiety to be documented here, and while exploring the research, I learned that I was correct. Out of the boys surveyed, 60% of them reported experiencing anxiety either sometimes or often, while 71.4% of girls reported experiencing anxiety's approach to education compared to that of the United States, which could be another leading factor. And I think that it's also interesting to note that based upon my previous interview in Oklahoma with Mrs. Wasson, this evidence also supports that teen girls experience more anxiety than teen boys. And based upon this research, it was also discovered that 2 out of 3 students say that they are sometimes or often distressed, which is more than half of the student body. So during my time at the rectorat, I was also gifted with 2 resources that teachers and counselors use on the field to aid students during times of stress or anxiety. The first of these boxes is entitled One Problem, 70 Solutions. Within this box are 70 flashcards featuring illustrations and explanations of solutions for every conceivable problem that may arise for a student. I think that such a tool is not only innovative, but essential when dealing with students who may have trouble rationalizing their decisions after being faced with a problem that they do not have the resources to solve on their own. And this is an example of one of the 70 cards in the set. As you can see, it not only explains the rationalization behind making the decision of asking for help, but it also provides an illustration that with simplicity that all ages can understand. And the other resource I was lucky enough to get my hands on was the Photo Langage. This book and selection of 48 photographs is a tool to be used with groups of adolescents and young people, which implements an experiential approach. The Photo Langage method organizes personal expression from selection of photographs. The phrase experience understand in order to build oneself is the gateway into understanding that organized work, reflection, and group discussion allows young people to build benchmarks and make informed choices. What really struck me about this tool was not only did it focus on the power of group work and drawing on strength from others, but it also provided a safe environment for teens, where instead of being condemned for their behavior, the approach is more so focused on the reflection of one's choices in a judgment-free zone. I mention these 2 resources because I feel that they provide valuable insight into what a teen who seeks support in the French educational system might be met with, and how such support might impact their mental well-being and anxiety. And what I love most about these resources is how they both address a diverse set of needs, and they can be interchangeably used on a manifold of students in order to aid them thriving problems. So I would also like to extend a special thanks to the Charbonnet family, who was my host family, who took me in as one of their own. I really can't express my full gratitude for these people. They really helped immerse me in the French culture in ways that I didn't even know were possible. I know that Madame Charbonnet was a wonderful cook, and I got to try so much French cuisine, and my host sister Josephine, we became really close over the 2 weeks. And I believe she wants to go into fashion design, which I thought was super interesting. And her brother Gabriel was super into film and theater. So I kind of got an inside perspective onto some of their interests as well, which was super special. But this project wouldn't be possible without them as well. And I'd also like to extend a special thanks to Madame Shepherd because with me throughout the majority of my interviews helped me translate and understand where the language barrier came into play. And she truly was just an amazing guide on this journey and a part of it I will never forget. And to wrap things up, as someone who struggles with anxiety herself, this project was a deeply personal journey for me. Connecting and speaking with teenagers not only in the US, but also in France was an incredibly transformative experience and one that I will continue to look back on as I enter this new chapter of my life with going to college. As previously discussed, based on thorough evidence and research, I have reached the conclusion that teens in France do deal with more anxiety than teenagers in America. And although the motivating factors for anxiety may have their roots in different phenomena, another factor of this research that is conclusive is that teens around the world are suffering. If you were to take one thing away from my report, I would hope that it would be the realization that change is inexorable as we continue to see teens in a worsening mental state. What we now must ask ourselves is what we can do as individuals to spark change in a world where students' mental well-being is put at risk. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amelia Manchia, and this morning I will be talking about the difference between pediatric nutrition in France versus the United States. In March of 2023, I was given the most incredible opportunity to travel to France and immerse myself completely into the French culture. This opportunity not only taught me incredible amounts about the French language and culture, but also about myself. I was given great connections to learn and explore my topic of research, and I am so thankful for all of the accommodations that were made in order for each of us to be able to research our topics. The purpose of my research was to use my time in France to observe meals served to school-aged children, both in the home and at school, and compare these meals to those served in the U.S., as well as observe the influence of advertisements on the consumption of fast food. In order to collect the data, I used a variation of methods. First, I kept a food log. At the end of each day, I would upload photos of what I ate for each meal, as well as any snacks I had consumed throughout the day. This food log allowed me to keep personal records of what I had consumed each day and helped me to contrast these meals to the ones I have here in Oklahoma. Second, I created a survey, which I sent out to my school here at Cassidy, as well as Edmond Memorial with the help of Madam Whittington. This allowed me to receive more than 500 answers on my survey, giving me very accurate data to refer to. I created the same survey but in French to send out to the students at the high school which I attended in Chili's. My high school at Amiens. Using the data gathered, I was able to create pie charts which aided my comparison between the two countries. Finally, I was able to meet with several professionals throughout the Amiens community, which got me access to infinite amounts of research regarding the pediatric nutrition in France. As well, here in the US, I interviewed the lead dietitian at OU Children's Health, which allowed me to learn more about the school lunch system here in the US and why eating as a family is so important. During my time in France, I focused mainly on what students were eating at school as far as the cafeteria, which they refer to as the canteen, as well as the home for breakfast and dinner. In addition, I was quite curious to how advertisements impacted the consumption of fast food for French students. I will first be talking about breakfast, what some call the most important meal of the day, but it is really not prioritized by many. During my time in France, I enjoyed such wonderful breakfasts. However, the food that I was eating was pretty much consistent daily. Halfway through my trip, I actually switched from my host sister's mom's house to her dad's house, and I still saw many similarities in the ways that we had breakfast and what we were eating each morning. I would be greeted by some sort of tea or coffee along with some type of bread. One morning, we also went down to a local bakery in order to get fresh bread for that morning. Aside from the delicious food, some things that really stuck out to me about breakfast was the process and routine in which the family had breakfast. In my host family, we would all have breakfast together every morning, before school and before the parents went to work, which was quite different than what I experienced here at my house. We all sat down and had a solid 15-minute breakfast. Although it wasn't long enough to eat something too big, we still had a quick meal, and then the entire family helped clean up so that the kitchen was left clean before we left for school and work. I thought this was a great way to start off the morning, and it was nice seeing how breakfast was such a team effort in their family. Next, I will be comparing some of the data that I got from the surveys that I sent out both in France and in the United States to schools. My data from the United States is the first graph, in which I observed that more than 55% of American students never have breakfast with their families during the week. Comparatively, in France, only 30% are not having breakfast with their family ever during the week. However, in France, 70% of students were having breakfast with families at least once a week, while the American students had only about 45% having breakfast with their family at least once a week. As I talked to other Americans and the nutrition specialists from OU Children's Health, I learned that the main reason why breakfast in America is not a sit-down meal is because of how rushed we are in the mornings. Most mornings in our homes during the week consist of getting things together for school and work and running late, leaving no time for breakfast, and much less time for the entire family to sit down and have breakfast together. This is why I was so surprised when I went to France and noticed how much of a routine family breakfast was for them even during the busy school week. Next, I will be talking about lunch. Americans usually refer to the cafeteria meals as mystery meat, while the French actually really like what they have to offer as lunch. Here are some pictures that I took at my high school, Michelis, in France. The students were greeted by the chefs, and there were several stations from which they could pick. Each day there was a variety of foods, and although some desserts were packaged, most of the main course meals and fruits were not packaged. Here are some of the delicious meals that I enjoyed while in France. The first two photos are cafeteria lunches that were very filling, and I had many options to pick from, while the third photo is a picture from one of the days that the students were able to go off campus and we went to a local sushi restaurant. It was absolutely delicious. Similar to American high schools, the kids are allowed to go off campus on specific days, and this was one of those times when the students went to a restaurant during the week. Another thing that stuck out to me about school lunch was the process in which students got their food. After scanning a card which contained money, the students were let into the lunchroom and knew exactly how to get their food. The signs indicated that they always needed to say hello in order to receive their food, and saying thank you was appreciated as well. The second photo is a composition of what a student meal should look like, and so it is specifically saying that the students have one option from each station. This meant that every student was receiving one dairy item, one main meal item, one type of bread, as well as one dessert. I have some typical American school lunches. The biggest variation that I noticed was the amount of packaged items that are in American students' lunches. While in France, everything was mostly fresh, and I believe this is why the students appreciated the quality of their food at school so much more. In addition, at my high school in France, none of what we used was disposable. After lunch, the students would each dump out their excess food and utensils into the according bucket, as well as their plates, dumping everything into the trash once they are done. After school is a typical time in which students get hungry. So I decided to ask one of my questions on the survey to be, how many snacks do you eat throughout the day? From American students, I observed that 50% of them were eating 1 to 2 snacks a day, while 71% of the French students were eating 1 to 2 snacks a day. However, it was more common for the American students to be eating 3 to 4 snacks a day than it was for the French students to be eating the same. I think that the reason why the French students have such a high percentage of having 1 to 2 snacks a day is because there's a very well-known term called a goûter that most students enjoy after school. This usually consists of bread and cheese or a quick fruit at home. Finally, I will be talking about dinner. Aside from the food, I really wanted to explore whether dinner was a family experience or an individual experience in France. During my time in France, I enjoyed some of the most amazing home-cooked meals at my host family's house, as well as the houses of their family members. These are some of the typical dishes that I enjoyed during my time in France. Dinner was always eaten as a family, and oftentimes eating with her extended family. We oftentimes ate with her extended family as well, including her uncles, cousins, and grandparents. Dinner was a very long process, and I was impressed by the patience of even the youngest cousins staying at the table. Normally, dinner would begin with a small snack that often included chips and some sort of vegetable. The parents would often drink wine during this time, and then we would go on and move to a bigger table, in which we would have an entree, and once we had finished eating our entree, we would enjoy bread and cheese. Here are some other examples of the meals that I ate. The very first picture is a picture of snails, which I thought were very unique to France. However, they were very delicious. Finally, we would end every meal with a dessert. These are some of the fancier desserts that I had, consisting of a crepe and some eclairs. But some nights we would also just have yogurt or some sort of fruit. Once dinner had ended, the entire family would once again help to clean up, and even the youngest siblings would help. I was very impressed again by the routine of dinner and the resilience of the whole family throughout the entire meal. I learned that in France, it is not as popular to get takeout or Postmates for dinner. One of the questions that stuck out to me from my data collected was the question of how many nights a week do you have a home-cooked meal for dinner? The American students replied that only 29% of them had a home-cooked meal 6 or 7 times a week, while in France it was over 50%. Home-cooked meals are a very normal thing for every day of the week, and many families only go out to eat a couple times a month. My data demonstrated this. 26% of American students were going out twice a week for dinner, and 32% were going out once a week. While in France, 50% replied that they were only going out twice a month. I also included the question, how many nights a week do you eat dinner with your family? In America, 47% of students replied that they ate dinner with their family more than 5 times a week, while in France, the students had an 80% reply that they had dinner with their families more than 5 times a week. And this clearly demonstrates how common family dinner is in France. After speaking with the OU nutritionist, she mentioned that all families should be having family dinner because it allows for the families to share about their days. During my time in France, we always got together at the end of the day during dinner, and we would share about school, and the parents would talk about how their work day was. And so I thought that this was resembled in our graph because so many more of the French families were having dinner together every night. As a part of my research, I wanted to look into the fast food consumed in France. by the French students. I feel that it is very common for American students to stop by a fast food restaurant after school or turn to fast food as the first option when they go out with their friends on the weekend. However, after speaking to some students at high school, as well as my host sister, I learned that fast food is not very popular for after school or even on the weekends. She said that from time to time, they would treat themselves to going out to McDonald's so that the bakery was a much more common spot for them after school. As far as advertisements, there were advertisements for fast food restaurants on the TV. However, they had an advisory on them referring to a movement in France called Manger Bouger, which is encouraging families to do physical activity. Most of these announcements were included on the fast food commercials. I got the chance to visit a Maison de la Santé, which was a building dedicated to improving the community's health. After speaking to a professional, I learned all about the resources that are available to the community, including many events promoting physical activity, as well as many school-based programs in which professionals would go and talk to the kids, as well as send things home for the parents to learn about why it is important to be eating healthy and doing physical activity. On the screen, there are some pictures of the pamphlets that they have created to spread awareness, as well as a bike in the upper corner, which is actually a bike that is used for some of their events in which the bike creates energy and it can blend a smoothie. I thought that this was a really fun way to promote moving and healthy eating. I had the opportunity to learn so much about my topic of research while I was in France. However, I want to end by talking about how amazing our trip truly was. Thank you to everyone who made this possible for the 7 of us. We had such an amazing time exploring and learning together. I know we all brought back wonderful friendships and wonderful memories to tell our friends and family. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope that you were able to learn more about the differences between pediatric nutrition in France versus the United States.
Hi everyone, I'm Veronica and I attend Heritage High School. I live there and I also attended lycée in France, and I just want to preface in saying that all my data comes from two schools, so it may not be, or it's probably not 100% representative of all of America and France, but I will be saying it like that, but just know that I am referring specifically to Heritage Hall and to school I attended in France. So my topic was, how much do Americans know about their government in comparison to French? First, I'm going to roadmap what I'm talking about, just so you guys know. I'm starting with a background on both governments, so basically just how both governments work and the education that a lot of French students are educated and their knowledge and how American students are, my results, and then a breakdown of student-reported information, as well as my final conclusion and a FAQ. So I'm going to talk about, these are basically the big key concepts of American government, which I'm sure you all know of, but I will still go through it just in case. So we are a democratic republic, and we have 3 branches, the legislative, executive, and judicial. We have this concept of checks and balances that keep branches from getting too much power. If you guys have all, probably the majority of you have attended American high school or American school, and you know that the concept of checks and balances is ingrained into your brain from basically like middle school forward. So the key concepts though of American government is federalism, which is the idea of sharing power between state and national governments. Civil liberties, which explains itself, liberties for the citizens and freedom, and republicanism, which is not the party of the idea. So the idea or theory that citizens must participate in their government for the good of the whole country. And for France, they are a semi-presidential republic, which means it's a combination of like presidential ideas and parliamentary ideas. And they also have a three-branch system consisting of the same executive, legislative, and judicial. And they also have different checks and balances put in place. Their key concepts are, from what I found, separation of church and state, which is huge there. It's called laicite, and it's a very prominent idea and reflects in the data that I will speak about later. Equality for citizens before the law, which this actually would be most similar to our 14th Amendment in America. And of course, liberty, equality, and fraternity, their motto. I'm also going to give a few little more background details of the French government just so you guys are informed. They have a president and prime minister. Their legislative branch is bicameral, as like ours in America, and the National Assembly, or the Assemblée Nationale, is created by popular vote, so like our House of Representatives is. Their Senate is elected by the Assembly, which was how America elected their senators before the 17th Amendment. But now we do it by popular vote, so it's no longer applicable. However, we used to have a lot more similarities if you count that. And then they don't have a Bill of Rights like we do, but they do reference the Declaration and Rights of Citizens, so there is citizen protection as well. And something that I found very interesting in both was that they both have the concept of innocence until proven guilty in the eyes of the law, which is very different than guilty until proven innocent, because the whole process is extremely different, and I just thought that was very interesting. So now into the education of French American students in America. Most students are taught history classes, and the history classes about background, as well as some kind of government education. It's normally very vague, not very in depth. But for those who choose to want to learn more, they can take AP Government, which goes into your rights as a citizen. The government more explained. In France, however, I found that there isn't really an equivalent of AP Gov, but that students are taught very well in the history classes about government, which also reflects in the data. And for here, I just pulled out some questions that I asked both groups, the exact same question. So here I asked, what kind of government does each country have? And I found that in France, a lot of people didn't know that they had a semi-presidential republic. In fact, only about 40% knew that. Whereas in America, 93% of people knew that we were a democratic republic. And I don't think that necessarily has to do with the quality of education. I just think that's maybe something that's a little bit less focused on, because as you see in the slide after this, and not this one, but the next slide, we're flipped in another concept where America maybe doesn't focus as much on the concept as France does, and you can see it reflected in the data. But for this one, I actually thought really interesting because this is about the same, like 81.9% versus 77.9%. That's not a huge difference. And I'm asking who the chief of army is, and they both were able to answer almost exactly, or within reason very similarly. So they both had very similar answers. And here it was the one that I was talking about, where we're completely flipped in France, where I asked if citizens have direct say in presidential elections. So the way that I asked this on the survey was basically, do we vote our president in by majority vote? And in France, they said yes, because that's the way we can do it. And most students know that, about 97.2% know that, whereas in America, and this could be because of the electoral college, it's a hard concept to explain and maybe a hard concept to grasp. Actually, the right answer was actually in the minority of 37.7%. And now I'm going to break down on my survey. I had a list of maybe more, in quotation marks, personal questions. So this consisted of what you learned your information through, where it influences your political opinion, and how they get information from social media. Or how they get information, sorry, I spilled a little bit early, but students reported that they learned most of their information through school and their parents. This was by far the majority of what students reported both in France and in America. They also reported that their political opinions were mostly influenced by their parents, friends, school, or religion. But remember how I talked about earlier the concept of laicite? or separation of church and state for France. And there was a significant difference between how much students reported in America that religion influenced their opinions versus in France. In France, about 9 students said that they were influenced by religion, and in America, that number was closer to the 30s. They're a lot higher. It was significant. And then I also asked students to give me where they get their information from, and a lot of people mentioned that they acquire their information through social media, word of mouth, or other external sources. And I really thought both of the groups significantly mentioned how much they use social media to acquire information, and I thought that just really shows, globalization, etc., and how important social media is for better or for worse, and how much of an impact it can have. And finally, I want to conclude that my initial hypothesis was that American students would not be as comfortable at their government in comparison to the French, and I will admit I was playing a little bit into the stereotype here, but can you blame me? I was exactly my hypothesis. And from the pool students interviewed through surveys and also through in-person interviews, there was not really that much of a clear division between the groups. I will say that I do think the French had a better grasp on the knowledge, but nothing that was significant enough for me to be able to make a clear division, because this could be because of it was just very subjective, and I just could have happened to interview groups of people that were very similar, or because there might not be really a clear division between the groups. And I also think that this may be a reflection of worldwide apathy from adolescents to government functions and things regarding the government. But I did think that overall this really made me relate a lot to the French, because I thought, I really didn't believe that there would be such a huge difference, that maybe they would be light years smarter than us, or light years better than us at this. And this really brought them more, I really saw them more human, and I was like, wow, we're really all the same. All students all around are all the same, even if they have potentially a better grasp of you. It's not significant enough to be able to be like, oh, they're just 5 years ahead of us. So it really brought me together with all the French students, and I was able to see, wow, all teenagers, all adolescents, all high schoolers essentially are very similar to each other, and maybe that's something that's really special around the world. And lastly, I'd like to give a special thanks to Madam Shepherd for helping us out and taking us around, although you were very sick. And I'm so sorry because it seemed horrible, but thank you for still putting up with us and for helping me buy that bus ticket after I lost it. I'd also like to thank the Latino family for taking me in, and for Aideen. I love her so much. She is my host family, or my host girl, and we were like this. I really enjoyed being with her. They also, special thanks to them for letting me try frog legs. That was an experience that I will never forget. It actually wasn't bad. I really enjoyed it. And I'd like to thank my fellows for coming with me on this. I know I was really nervous, and I was really happy to spend time with you and get to know all of you. I really appreciate all of you. I think you guys are amazing. I'd also like to thank the AFdOKC process for selecting me and choosing me to go on this program. I really enjoyed my time there, and I will never forget it. I have so much love for this program and for France and for the people I've met. And I'd also like to thank the Eleanor Kirkpatrick Foundation for funding this program, because it's very special to me, and I will honestly never be forgetting it anytime soon. So thank you for helping me and for helping us go on this program. That's all.
Fellows, can we get one last group photo, please, maybe up on the stage? Yeah.
I'm going to, hold on.
The words off their face.
Thank you.
Makes them look really smart. Oh, that's good. Yeah, thank you so much.
As we look here, exciting stars. Big smiles. Thank you so much. The presentations were fabulous.
Should we reenact it? Okay, Caroline, we need to reenact it. Thank you all so much for coming. This concludes our program. And have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. And thank you. It was great to see all the fellows. And I hope you have a last week at school and going to college. Stay in touch and get involved in Shannon. You want to do